Hi, everyone, and welcome. It's lovely to see so many of you here in the room today, and it's also lovely to see fewer umbrellas than yesterday. My name is Victoria Westhead, class of 1983, parent class of 2017 and 2019, and chair of the Pembroke Center Associates Council. The Pembroke Center is delighted to be sponsoring today's forum, Launchers and Leaders, Brown Women and Entrepreneurship, in partnership with the Jonathan M. Nelson Center for Entrepreneurship. The Pembroke Center for Teaching and Research on Women organizes programs such as this one to connect alumni, and other friends with the center. Founded in 1981, the Pembroke Center's research and teaching explore social change and how questions of difference, such as gender, race, class, and religion, affect our thinking and our world. The Pembroke Center's two archives preserve the history of Brown and Rhode Island women and the intellectual history of feminist scholars. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Danny Warshay, class of 1987. He is celebrating his 30th reunion, parent class of 2020, and executive director of the Jonathan M. Nelson Center for Entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you all for coming. I want to first thank the Pembroke Center for collaborating with the Jonathan M. Nelson Center for Entrepreneurship. As I was saying to Victoria, we're looking forward to lots of other collaborations as we move forward. For how many of you is, and this may not pertain to anybody, but is this your first time visiting back to campus? Oh yes, it pertains to a few. So special welcome to all of you, and hope we see you at many more opportunities like this graduation and reunion. I also want to say a quick shout out to classmates of mine who are also celebrating their 30th reunion, and a special welcome back to a former student of mine, Sadie, who I know is going to talk a little bit about the relationship she had with the course I taught on entrepreneurship. I'm going to tell you just very briefly about the Jonathan M. Nelson Center and then turn this over to our illustrious panel. The Jonathan M. Nelson Center for Entrepreneurship began just about 8 months ago, and I like to say, hit the ground sprinting. And some of you are familiar with all the program we've already undertaken, and we're really excited to consider ourselves a startup, and part of that approach is collaborating with people all throughout the Brown ecosystem, including the Pembroke Center. We represent and we deliver on our mission of making entrepreneurship an essential part of the Brown experience in three fundamental ways. Curricularly, and that means we teach entrepreneurship in the Brown curriculum, as some of you know, since you've taken courses in the curriculum. And that includes the course that Sadie took with me back in fall of 2011 called The Entrepreneurial Process. So we take seriously the academic rigor of our mission to teach in the curriculum at Brown. We also do things co-curricularly outside the classroom, which means we sponsor programs and events and speakers. We bring folks like DEB MILLS-SCOFIELD back to campus each semester to meet with students, to mentor students, to deliver value from the experience that they've had at Brown and beyond Brown in their own entrepreneurial careers. And then finally, we provide a very wide range of venture support to startups and other groups of students who are looking to apply what they've learned in an entrepreneurial setting. So that includes financial resources, grants of increasing funding sizes, mentorship. We would encourage any alums who are interested in mentoring students to be in touch with us. We run a summer accelerator to advance the trajectory of Brown launch startups. In fact, I see some of our students who will be participating this summer in that accelerator called B-Lab. And we have a real commitment to making sure that student ventures don't just fall off the cliff once they leave College Hill, and we provide transition to, just like Sadie, make sure that you can launch something which has real sustainability. If you're interested in learning more about the Jonathan M. Nelson Center, you can go to our website, entrepreneurship.brown.edu. We would love to hear from you, certainly to the extent that you're interested in participating with us, and you can email us at entrepreneurship@brown.edu. And then finally, I'll invite anybody who's interested, guests included, to attend our open house, our Entrepreneurship open house this afternoon, which is 4 to 6 on the second floor of Brown Hillel at 80 Brown Street. It gives me a lot of pleasure to be able to introduce our moderator for this morning, for today's panel, DEB MILLS-SCOFIELD, class of 1982. And I know Deb for many years, and we're very close friends, and I said it feels a little contrived to introduce you so formally, but I just want to make sure that I don't omit anything from Deb's illustrious career, since so much of it is so meaningful for our panel this morning. Deb graduated from Brown with a degree in cognitive science, and true to her identifying her own entrepreneurship very early, was a concentration that she helped to found as a student, and others have followed in that path, studying similar kinds of disciplines. In her professional work of over 25 years, Deb has helped numerous companies to create and implement entrepreneurship and innovative-based strategic plans. One of the most wonderful things about the way that Deb works with those companies, and a reflection, I think, of her generous spirit, is that Deb always asks her clients to match and donate 10% of her fee to improve the lives of those in their surrounding community. Deb is also a partner at a firm called Glengarry LLC, an early-stage venture capital firm in Cleveland. I happen to be a fellow Clevelander, too, so that's one part of our backgrounds that we share in common. And she is the co-creator of a book that many of you no doubt know and use. Certainly all of my former students know it, Alex Osterwalder's book, Business Model Generation, among other books, including several of her own that are forthcoming. Deb is recognized internationally as one of the top 40 bloggers on topics related to innovation and entrepreneurship. And I think probably for our context this morning and the way in which many of you know Deb already, certainly students and recent alumni, is that, and I can say this, I think, with some credibility, that Deb is one of the most generous and most beloved mentors in any part of the Brown community. She is constantly giving of herself to inspire, and I think the right word is nurture, hundreds of Brown students and recent alumni, particularly aspiring entrepreneurs. Sometimes I know I say you're a Clevelander, but it really feels like we share a town of living in Providence since you're here so often. So I want to thank you, Deb, for all that you do, all that you give to Brown. It's rare that I have a public forum in which to do that, and I wanted to take advantage of that, and also for moderating today's panel. And one thing that Deb wanted me to caution us about is that Deb has to leave here right at noon because she's in demand somewhere else to participate in another event. So please join me in welcoming to the forum, DEB MILLS-SCOFIELD.
Good morning. Is this, they're on. Holy moly, thank you. So I'd like to welcome you to this panel on women entrepreneurs at Brown. And I'm going to kick it off with one story. So we're going to pick on Sadie today because she is so good at being picked on. In the process of becoming an entrepreneur, she graduated in 12, and over that summer, she'd moved to New York to start her 305 Fitness, which is an amazing thing. And I remember several Skype calls over the summer with, "It's not going to work, Deb. What am I doing? Did I do the wrong thing?" and all that. And you know, you look at her today and where she is, and it's tenacity and going for it. So with that, I'd like to kick off our panel this morning. You all have bios, so we wouldn't take up time going over them, so please read them, with a question for each of you. And I'll start down there with Sarah. Oh, you know, well, you'll introduce yourselves as I ask this question. Those little things I kind of forget. How did being at Brown shape you as an entrepreneur?
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah CARSON, and I'm the founder and CEO of Leota. We're a women's apparel company based in New York, and we make the most comfortable, versatile, machine-washable fashion on the market. We sell to Bloomingdale's, Nordstrom, Stitch Fix, hundreds of stores globally, and we were named one of the fastest-growing private companies in America for 2 years in a row and the top 50 run by women. And Brown shaped me as an entrepreneur, not from a fashion perspective, guys, okay? Shocker. I think when I graduated, the big thing was wearing skirts and pants at the same time. No. But Brown is a place where you pretty much had to write a business plan for your education. And you walk in, you're given a lot of resources, but then you gotta figure it out. You gotta figure it out. And that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. In addition to having grit, so much grit and so much tenacity, you gotta be able to figure it out. So that is what excited me about becoming an entrepreneur, and that's part of what I got here at Brown. I was a women's studies major, gender studies major at Brown, sorry. That year that I studied here, we changed it to gender studies. I was one of 6. And I think the department has grown so much in the last 15 years, but at the time, a lot of the students weren't really willing to be like all in with gender studies. A lot of them were, okay, I'm going to be economics also, I'm going to be, comp lit also. I was one of 6 people that was like all in for women. And I bring that way of thinking to my business every day, because women are my job, figuring out what she wants. And so I'm really glad that I had the Pembroke Center and that I had Brown to shape me in that way as an entrepreneur.
Thank you. And we're going to come back to that point in the next question, too, that as a woman. VIBHA, how did being at Brown shape you?
I'm VIBHA Pinglé. I was a grad student at Brown. I did my master's and Ph.D. in sociology at Brown. What I think what I took away from Brown and the way it shaped me is just being entrepreneurial in what I'm studying, being entrepreneurial, and second, added to that, being sort of globally integrated. I felt I got that while I was a student here. I was here for about 4 to 5 years, depending on field work and so on. And I also taught here after finishing and more recently. And I think what I take away is being in a community that's very intellectually creative, that's very globally aware. And I think this is true uniquely for Brown, that students and faculty and everyone at Brown is willing to encourage people to make connections across disciplines, exactly as you said, right? And I think that is incredibly valuable to being entrepreneurial, being able to make those connections.
Hi everyone, I'm MORRA, AARONS-MELE. I graduated in 1998, which means next year will be my 20th reunion. And I have to give, I'm such a Leota fan. If you don't own a Leota dress, please, because they're incredible and they travel, and I've worn them also. I've had 3 kids and they go from pregnancy to post-pregnancy. They're amazing. So that's my plug for you. So I agree that I think Brown really forces you to chart your own path. And for me, when I got to Brown, I had grown up in New Jersey and I had big dreams. I wanted to be a media mogul. And I met people from all over the world, from all over the country, from so many different lives, people whose lives had glamour and excitement that I could only begin to imagine. And it sparked my imagination. I also was allowed to indulge and experiment with the various sides of my interest at Brown, which, I think is also really useful in being an entrepreneur. I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. I still don't even consider myself an entrepreneur, but I have a very Brown life. I am an author, I run a business, I speak, I blog, I do all kinds of stuff, and I'm a political consultant, but I'm also really into fashion, and I've woven it all into my political life, in my business life. And I think that 20 years later is the gift that Brown gave me, is the ability to be a multitude of selves, figure out how to make money off most of them, and also to deal with the hard parts. I will say that when I was at Brown, I was really depressed a lot of the time. It's very bittersweet for me coming back here. because I think that being in college is hard, and being in Brown sometimes can be lonely because no one's telling you what to do. And that was also really good preparation in retrospect for charting my own course and figuring out a life that was right.
That's a very interesting, important point. Sadie.
Well, I got really my start at Brown. I started the business our senior year of college. But even before then, my name is Sadie. I run 305 Fitness. It's a dance cardio workout with a live DJ. We have three cities, Boston, New York, DC. We have international pop-ups. We have a team of 50 instructors, 35 DJs. It's 50,000 clients. It's really, really fun. I really got my start teaching classes here. First day of freshman year, went up to the gym and said, let me teach this class. It was the old OMAC. So that's how I really got my start. I would go flyer around. People would come to my class, and this was how I was sort of testing the product and building an audience, was here at Brown. Obviously, to everyone's point, the flexibility and the independence that Brown inspires in you as a student also really helped me chart my own course. But even in the literal sense of building a following, building a product, the friends that I made here, Brielle, who's sitting in the audience, was the one who turned to me senior year and said, you should do this. And then we tried to convince Danny Warshay to let us into his entrepreneurship seminar, which was so helpful in me writing the business plan. And Sam, who's sitting in the audience today, he's my COO, so I met him at the ice cream social. So a lot of, in a more like literal sense, I really got my start here at Brown.
Cool. So one of the questions I have is, as you all started your business, and it gets to your point, Sarah, and I'm going to try to keep us on time, about 3 minutes each. How do you think your view of business and entrepreneurship as a woman, taking aside issues of women and parity and raising equity and all that, just as a mindset, how do you think that shaped your business?
That's a good question.
We can come back to you if you'd like.
I can think of one way that being a woman has helped me in my business, because for the most part, it has not helped me as a business person, as an entrepreneur. But one way that it has is that I'm very willing to be wrong, and I'm very willing to be vulnerable. And that's not just a lady thing, but I think women are a little better at that in general. I didn't get to where I am alone, and I'm not getting to where I'm going alone. And so asking questions, willing to just like get the right answer no matter who it's from. It could be someone who just walked in the door yesterday. It doesn't have to be all about me. So that's helped me get to the right answers faster. And it's also helped me be very agile as an entrepreneur. Because if I see something's not working, there's no ego about it. It's just like, let's change it. Let's change it right now. That's something that's really cool about having my own business also. You know how in New York, when people say they're an actor, they're really like a bartender or a like server? Okay. Well, I love getting advice from people, but it goes a little far. So I was at a benefit, and a real estate agent guy came up to me, and he was like, you know what, Sarah? You really got to scale up your business, and he's giving me all this advice about what I should do. And I was so annoyed by that, and I called my buddy, and I was like, dude, I'm so sick of people telling me what to do with my business that have no idea. What do you do about that? And he was like, no one tells me how to run my business. And that actually never occurred to me.
Totally.
Good point. VIBHA?
So I got started founding this nonprofit, Ubuntu at Work, when I did research soon after I graduated from Brown, studying women micro-entrepreneurs in South Africa. And I was there to learn, to understand how they escaped poverty and how they sort of found their footing and to grow a business and so on. And the two things I learned that were critical in talking to them, women in South Africa and elsewhere in Africa and Asia later, was that what really worked for them is that they needed to connect with others outside their community. And the other thing they needed a strong community. That was important. So, in many ways, after I started Ubuntu, those two ideas became critical to Ubuntu, as in we needed ideas from people around. We needed to connect with people in different walks of life to get those ideas, get those fresh ideas, get that entrepreneurial spirit, without people lecturing you and so on. I get that. But at the same time, we needed to be a community. We needed to define ourselves as a community, and I think that really helped. And that sort of, strengthened Ubuntu as an organization and helped it become an organic organization that could evolve in different ways as the need arose.
Interesting. More.
Well, so women are my life too. My business is called Women Online. We create digital campaigns that mobilize women. And my husband calls it vag.org. When he's in a testy mood. So
is he still alive?
He did not go to Brown. So I was a political consultant in Washington, D.C. after the 2004 election, and I was sitting with a bunch of bloggers in a regular gathering that they had, and it was all these young dudes, and they were talking about why healthcare was so stupid and why are we always arguing about healthcare. And even though I was only 27 years old, I thought, God, these men don't know what they're talking about. Like, healthcare is the most important thing. But I was the only woman in the room. I was often the only woman. I was a digital political consultant, so I worked with so many men. And I just got sick of it one day. I was always working in rooms of men and feeling like my voice was stifled. And then I met the founder of blogher.com, which sadly has been subsumed and sold, but was for many years the largest community online of women who blog. And the founder met me and she said, I want you to be our political blogger. And I said, I don't know anything about politics. I can't write about politics. She said, you're the director of internet marketing for the Democratic National Committee. You've worked for presidents. Like, what the? And I started blogging. And that gave me a public voice. All of a sudden, I realized I did know about politics. People did take me seriously. And it gave me the courage. And I left that one-sided, male-dominated political consulting, and I started my firm, Women Online. And we only work on campaigns and for clients who women are their key audience. And even to this day, I'll meet men and they'll say, oh, that's such a nice niche business. And I'll say, niche? Like, excuse me? But that's okay. My niche is powerful.
I agree with Sarah that it's hard to think of ways that being a woman has benefited my career, because it has certainly hindered it in more ways than I can name. But I think maybe one way that it's benefited me has been just being really intimately tied to my product. It's a product that's mostly consumed by women, that's young and millennial and really has women embedded in it. And I think a lot of the unsolicited advice that I get, especially from men, tends to be about like making just crazy, stupid ideas, honestly, that I'm like, a woman wouldn't appreciate that. So I think I can just sort of understand it because I'm a consumer of my own product, and I think being a woman has helped me understand it better.
So I'm going to go back to you more for a minute, and then we can all discuss the next thing, which is one should ask, regardless of gender, how do you manage being an entrepreneur and having a significant other and or children and or being a daughter or son or a sibling? Because some of us are getting into that sandwich generation, some of us not yet, but will, of taking care of parents and all that. And this should be asked regardless of whether you're male or female. And there's a great guy, Brad Feld, who's out at Boulder, who's written a book about the startup relationship or spouse or something like that. So how have you all navigated, dealt or not, or, well, you did, whether we did it right or not, right? Being a significant other or a parent or a kid or a sister, whatever, how have you navigated that? Because there is no right or wrong to this. And so since you have 3 kids, I'm going to ask you first.
Well, I will say that my business has had fits and starts. When my business really got up and running in about 2010, I was so gung-ho and I was like, ready. And then I got pregnant with my second child sort of unexpectedly when I still had like a 1.5-year-old, and my father became terminally ill with cancer. And so I lost a year, I just lost a year. And that's okay, and with every kid, I've had to sort of dial back, and then I rev up again. My youngest child is now 2.5, and I'm like ready to go. I think that part of what I like to talk about in entrepreneurship is that it's your business. It's not anyone else's business, right? To the mansplaining thing. When you are an entrepreneur, everyone will try to give you advice. And you will read Inc. magazine and see people like Sarah who are incredibly fast growing, and you will feel bad if your business is not on that list. And I feel that way all the time. I have a small business. We're very successful, we're very profitable, but we're small. And that's okay, because I have created a business that actually gives me time to be with my kids and gives me that time that I need. And so it doesn't mean I'm any less of an entrepreneur. I may never be a billionaire, but I'm still a successful entrepreneur. And so I think that my thing about having a life and having a business is you can absolutely do it. You're going to have to make compromises. That's life. And I think that it starts with having a really strong vision of what you want from your business.
Others?
I don't believe in balance.
Yeah.
I think striving for balance is striving for mediocrity. I think you gotta choose a handful of things and do those things really, really well, and then just not do the other things and not feel bad about it at all. So that's the challenge, is the guilt management, right? So strive for beauty, strive for perfection, but don't strive for balance. That's boring.
And impossible.
Totally, yeah.
I think I agree with you that balance is hard and balance is impossible, and why strive for it. So I have a different response to it, which is sort of picks up from what you said, which is I think the way to deal with having a family and raising a child or children and having a partner and dealing with a startup, whether it's an enterprise or a social enterprise, is to really be immersed in it. To not really have a work-life balance, to integrate the two.
Yes.
And I think that's when it works. So it's sort of choosing, but choosing them, whatever you have to choose, just doing it all and bringing them together. So it means that, I've taken my son for a outreach meeting in South Africa in this village in Limpopo, which was 45 degrees Celsius and hot and miserable, and I was collapsing under the heat, in the heat, talking to a group of women, and he was up a tree showing his iPad to a bunch of kids from the village who'd never seen someone like him before. And it worked. Or going to a conference in Tanzania, and I didn't know what to do with him while I was in the conference, and he learned Swahili for 3 days and sort of has a little book that he totes around that sort of has Swahili words, and the guy taught him African songs, and so on. So I think it's not about looking for a balance, but about integrating the two and really immersing yourself in it.
I loved Sarah's response, and I tend to agree that when people talk about work-life balance, for me, I'm not married, I'm single, I really devote all my time to work. It's really more priorities for me than balance, so I'm unapologetically ambitious. This business means the world to me. It feels like an existential need for me that doesn't just feel like a job. So I think I've when I owned that at a younger age, it felt lonely, but it also felt really liberating to say, this matters to me more than anything else in my life, and I will do anything that I can to make sure that it works. And that means that relationships and friendships and family have often taken a backseat to that. And I think that my true good friends have understood that. And it has been difficult. I don't have time for like coffees and catch-ups and acquaintances. I have like 2 good friends, and that's what matters to me, and then building this business really matters to me. So yeah, but I work with my best friend, I work with my brother, so also integrating it into work has helped as well, but really knowing that this is what matters to me the most and being able to prioritize everything after that, and knowing I have a very limited amount of free time and social time, and maybe it's 5 hours a week, and I know the 2 people I want to spend that with.
I think, you know, one of the nice things about Brown is it's usually taught us and both rather than either or. And the world is still very either or. And I think as we, you know, from things that we've all talked about here, taking your kids with you. You know, I've done that on snow days and had my daughter analyze a client and the interactions among the C-suite and later say to me, you know, that guy cannot stand that guy. Did you see that guy? Just sit there like this, you know, and I'm like, ooh, maybe forget school for you, kiddo, and you can just, you know, come work for me. But that integrating is a really important piece, and I think you've given your son opportunities most kids wouldn't have. And your children, and I look at my kids, so I have a son and a daughter, and that impacts their view of what a woman does in terms of thinking for my son of his spouse and my daughter for herself as a person. And one of the things, getting back to your point earlier about being vulnerable, it was one of my mentees up here, and I'm looking to see if she's here, but she's not, that brought up with me, you know, Deb, it's okay to let us know you're not having a good day. And I thought of that, well, really? But, you know, I'm the mentor, you're the mentee, you've got to be in control. And that vulnerability gives others the freedom to be vulnerable, and then also opens up, you know, the Brown ethos of learning to ask great questions. And one of the great questions that always comes up with entrepreneurship is, so how'd you get your start financially? Because we all know women do not generally have the opportunities for angel, early stage seed, VC funding. So how did you guys start funding your business?
Well, I'll start. My business is totally bootstrapped. I'm the 100% owner of the company and have grown simply by reinvesting cash flow, and we've been profitable since year 2. And I started with like $10,000 of savings. I was an investment banker before this, but not during those years where people made a lot of money in investment banking, so. But I did have a little bit of a runway. Like I didn't have to work for a year. I was married at the time, but that actually didn't help me financially at all. Love ya. But I had really good relationships with banks, mortgagees before starting my business. So if any of you are planning on owning your own company, get your mortgage first, because once you have your business, like, the banks are going to hate you. So get all those ducks in a row before you quit your real job.
Good advice. Yeah. So I have a social enterprise. It's a registered nonprofit. And so it started with sort of donations from my husband and me, as well as from close friends and so on. And I think that's actually been one of the hardest bits of being a woman-focused nonprofit, is trying to explain, whether it's to investors or to explain to donors, that it's run and it is something that's organic. It depends on how the women want to participate in the organization. There's a sense in which the business world sort of works better when it's sort of, there's a manager out there supervising what happens and what doesn't happen and so on and so forth. So it's hard to explain to donors and hard to explain to angel investors and so on that it's an organic organic. It's a woman-owned business, woman-owned micro-enterprise at the local level. And we have to work with these women, whether it's in various parts of Africa or Asia, and they have to participate and they get to have their say. It's not about someone in New York or Boston or wherever sort of saying, well, what's your plan? And let's. So I think it's sort of been interesting to see how being a woman sort of focused organization has hurt it financially.
Interesting. Yeah.
I do think that if you, if you're a woman in business and your consumers are women, you might get a double penalty when you're trying to raise money. So I also have a bootstrap business. We're a professional services firm, so we don't scale really. I started freelancing when I was in graduate school, and I just picked up some clients doing digital political consulting, and just slowly built that until I needed to hire staff and needed to hire more staff. And I did invest in some software and in a database when I felt ready, because I wanted to have, it's called the Mission List, and it's an influencer database of powerful bloggers and social media influencers who want to do good. So I did feel like, to supplement my professional services agency, I wanted some sort of product. So I did invest in that in year 3, which was sort of the biggest outlay of cash that I've ever done, and that felt scary. But I have learned a lot of lessons, because I did go to Brown and I haven't taken math since 11th grade. I had to learn a lot, although in grad school I took a little, I had to learn some lessons, and I had to learn to not be afraid of money, and to treat cash flow as king. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. And actually, I have to plug my book. It's coming out September 26th. It's a business guide for introverts. But I have a whole chapter on how to manage your monthly nut as a small business owner, because to me, it doesn't matter what other people tell me about my money if I'm in control of my cash and I know what's going on. And I think that's been the biggest lesson to me as a business owner over these years.
Similarly, I also bootstrapped the business, not really out of choice, but because it was so hard to raise money. It sucks. I don't mean to be like such a downer, but I definitely think that's one of the most sexist areas is out there, raising money. It's awful, especially when you're young and especially when your product is consumed by women. So it was very difficult. I got a lot of no's. I got so many, wasting so much time that was really, I don't know, a creepy power play or trying to take me on a date or like, why? Just leave me the fuck alone. So that was really hard. And the first few years, it was all bootstrapped. I won that business plan competition. It was $25,000. It's no money at all to start a business. I'm also very honest about the fact that, I am very lucky that I had parents who wrote a check basically to help me out at the beginning, and that's one way that I think if you're an entrepreneur who doesn't have that access to capital and to privilege like I did, I can't even imagine, because I knew whether that money was there or not, that I knew where my next meal was coming from. I never was really at risk that I would truly run out of money. So I think that's definitely a way that privilege has really helped, and I imagine that being an entrepreneur and not having any access, whether it's money or friends, must be absolutely terrifying, because for me, even having that access was very scary. But most of it was just bootstrapped, came from clients who I saw were enjoying the product, and I basically begged for money. Like I was like, come on, Lauren, I know you have $25,000. Like, it got that bad. I had to make all kinds of scary phone calls and say, hey, Mr. Contractor, I know you just built this studio. Can I get a 6-month extension? It was like, it's bad, because we've built these studios. They're very, very expensive. But now, luckily, that it's been 5 years, we're very profitable. We have multiple locations and tens of thousands of clients. Now it's almost too easy to raise money. Now I've sort of hit my limit and we can't raise more money. I've also learned in the investing world sort of how stupid it all is, honestly, because I'm still the same person. I'm still just as competent and confident, and the product is the same, and it's always been a fantastic business. But the psychology of investing really matters. So getting that right person who brings everybody else in, it's like people now, I mean, I love my investors. I don't want to talk badly about them, but oftentimes people now who are showing interest are people who have never even seen the product or engaged in it, and they just heard that their friend wants to invest, so they want to invest. So it's kind of silly, honestly, this world of investing. And I felt so shut out by it for so long, and now I'm like, really? This is it? And also, it's all just learning the lingo and the conversation. And that was something at first, asking people to invest, asking people for money was terrifying. And now you know these terms. So if you are intimidated, if you're trying to go out there and raise money, my advice would be focus on building your business so you can show profit, because at the end of the day, that speaks higher than anything else that you can do. And then getting the right people and really learning the lingo and showing this kind of that everyone else is interested and you're going to miss out. Being a kind of salesperson in this way has really helped too. So, but it sucks raising money. It's so dumb. It really is.
I always said that I would hate to be, I would hate to have to bring a deal to my VC firm, which says something. That's also why we have a really good success rate. But you know, we liked having people come to us who, they still needed money, but it was such an oxymoron. The more revenue you had coming in, so in a way the less money you needed to run, not maybe to scale, the more we loved you. And granted that my firm's in Cleveland, which is the Midwest, it really is, even though they don't always admit it. Sorry. True, isn't it really the Midwest? Thank you. We didn't get that much female deal flow from women. And we had one that was a chemist, and we invested in that. And there were a bunch of us that were really skeptical about the science behind it and lost a lot of money on that deal. And then we had another young woman who had a lifestyle business. So she was building a community online. And there were a few of us, and I'm the only female partner in the firm. So there were other men with me that thought, you know, this could catch on really big. There's no IP, but it could be big, and we should invest, and we didn't in that. And so that one then someone else invested in and did really well. I don't know where they are now. But part of the issue was we didn't have the deal flow coming in to choose from because you didn't want to put yourself in that situation. Interestingly enough, none of us up here have an MBA. So for any of those that you do, I'm very happy for you. Hope you enjoyed it. But I hope that raises the point that it's not necessary. It depends what you're going to do, and sometimes you need it for the cachet or to attract the right network. But we have 4 very successful women up here, and me, and none of us have, well, it's harder. We don't have an MBA, just a lot of grit. So before I open it up for some brief questions, how many parents are here?
Woohoo!
Okay. Any words of advice for parents of entrepreneurs? Things you would have liked your parents to know as you started doing your thing?
I can start.
Yes, you can.
I have incredibly supportive parents. Financially, yes, but emotionally, we're so supportive when I did this. I am so grateful for that. They are my biggest cheerleaders. They saw that this was something that I did with a passion, and they were so enthusiastic and excited. They never put any pressure on me about money either, so it was never about making money. It was always just about doing what you love and doing it with pride. I feel very grateful to them for that. They also gave me a ton of independence as a kid. So I grew up with 4 siblings. They were both parents who worked very, very late, and you know, I was cooking and making pancakes at like age 3. So they'd leave us $20 and they'd be like, figure out dinner. Go, you know, knock yourself out. My brother and I'd walk to KFC. So KFC or Subway tonight, Ben. So that kind of independence and confidence has really helped me at work, because there isn't a thing that I feel I can't figure out if I'm given the opportunity. However, asking a lot of questions has been very irritating. So still, when I get on the phone with my dad, I think he, you know, he's kind of a neurotic person anyway, but he thinks it's like our way to bond. It's like, it's a lot. You know, every day it's like, how much money did you make today? How many people came in? I'm like, oh my God, that's insane. So he's sort of like the nightmare investor. So I would say, like, back off on the questions if you can. But full emotional support and encouraging them to be independent, that was really, really helpful.
Encourage your kids to take risks.
It's okay. They've gone through Brown. They've learned a lot. Let them have their time to take a risk, and it'll work out in the end.
One thing my parents did great as parents of an entrepreneur is they talked about their concerns with other people, not with me. So I really recommend that to the parents out there, because of course they're going to be worried. What the hell is your kid doing? Don't talk about it with your entrepreneur child. And also, they found specific ways that I wanted their help, and they were helpful there, but didn't try and help me in other ways. So, for example, I would call my dad, and, you know, ring, 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 he would pick up, hello, and I'd be like, hi, is this the Leota HR department? He helped me with all my HR issues, and I was so grateful for that. So find the thing your kid wants help with and do that. And then my final thing is, especially if you have daughters, take a good look at whether or not how you're valuing them. And it's not about what she looks like. It's not about whether she's getting married or having kids or anything like that. So my parents were great at that, so hooray for feminist parents.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh God, I'm 40 and I'm still working this all out. I mean, my mother. I think for me, I mean, they were great, but I think for me the live tension is still like, oh, we're so proud of you and all of your accomplishments, but why do you let nannies raise your children? I mean, that is to me a very real issue in my life every single day. And I don't have any good answers except to cultivate a tribe of women, you know, and this can be really hard actually, depending on where you live. Gotta have your kitchen cabinet, you know. If I didn't have other women entrepreneurs in my boat to talk to when I'm just overwhelmed with guilt and, you know, my mother's driving me crazy or whatever, I would be lost. So, yeah, keep your allies.
One of the things that last year I was in Silicon Valley, I was brought out by a major archetype out there to help their women in tech rise up the ladder. So they're women in marketing business just fine, but the women in tech engineers and CS were not climbing up. There are a lot of reasons. And one of the comments that one of the guys in the C-suite came up to me and he looked over and he goes, you see that woman over there? I said, yes. And he goes, well, she's just really great. I've asked her to mentor my daughter who's 13, who's really interested in STEM. So being the snarky brown kid, right? I said, oh, so what's the going rate for mentoring these days?
Good for you.
Well, what do you have to lose, right? And he just kind of looked at me. And I said, well, she's just doing it because, you know. I said, oh, that's really neat. So whose daughter are you mentoring? And I think as we look out there, so I'm saying this to kind of you males in the audience, if you're in business or wherever and you want your daughters to be mentored, whose daughter are you going to mentor? And raise that up. We have about 5 minutes. You want to do some Q&A? Do we have any questions? And I don't know where the Q&A things are. Oh, Martha's got it. Any questions? Yes.
I have a question for, is VIBHA, is that how
Yep.
you pronounce your name? I worked in nonprofits in my career as fundraising, so I was interested in your presentation and didn't feel I fully understood when you first started. Did you just start mobilizing women and then finally have a case and then get a grant, or did it work?
Well, we started with getting a few private donations, and then doing outreach with the women, and that's how we started. And the goal is to get self-funded through the work that we get the women. So what we do is plug the women into global supply chains.
Oh, self-funding.
Right. Yeah. So the goal is to plug them into global supply chains. And in a way, Deb, that's another place where I feel being a woman and really hurts, because trying to explain a woman-focused nonprofit to corporations, to private corporations anywhere in the world, this is not a US problem, anywhere in Europe, this is the same problem, to go explain to them that this is what the women are doing and they need support for what they're doing. No one believes, the middle managers or the senior middle managers, whatever, never believed that the women could actually be doing it and pulling it off.
Hi. For anyone who has any advice on this, how have you managed making decisions and being a leader, making firm decisions in situations that you're really uncertain of what the answer is?
Well, I have a great team of organized operators, Sam being one of them, and I just hope that they're flexible with change. Because sometimes at the very, 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 very last minute when we've spent a ton of time working on it, I say, actually, I changed my mind, let's do this. So just rolling with the punches and not really making a firm decision until you've made one.
I'm so glad, if I could just jump in there, I'm so glad you asked about uncertainty, because that was one of the biggest things I had to get used to as an entrepreneur, is dealing with this constant uncertainty. It's a very insecure feeling, but the fact is you have to act. You absolutely have to act. And if you wait until you have all the information and you're really positive, it's too late.
That's true. Yep.
Well, and I will agree with that, and I will say it's funny, and one of the things that I love about my husband, and I've learned from him, is he was an entrepreneur also for many years, and I always joke that I channel my inner privileged white male. He comes from such a spirit of abundance. Like, I feel like a lot of women, you know, scarcity is very real for us, you know, certainly if you're raising money or whatever, we're nervous there's not going to be enough. And one of the things that I learned from him and from other successful entrepreneurs I cultivated in my life from my kitchen cabinet is you just got to pretend that there's plenty of pie. And like that, right? There is enough pie. I am there, you know what? Even if I lose this client, there's more. And literally cultivating that discipline over years and years and years has made me able to make decisions.
Great answer.
There's very little you can do in life that is irrevocable, except, you know, die. As of now, that's irrevocable. But, you know, even losing a limb isn't what it used to be. So I think as you're, you know, you don't know, you do have to just decide, and very few of those decisions are going to permanently set the course of your business or your life for the next 80 years. Any other questions? Yes.
I would just like to add to that in making a decision when you're not really certain, it's okay to take input from your team and not be afraid of feedback from them, to free the dialogue back and forth so they have the ability and the right to say what they believe, even if it differs from what you believe, and to be able to hear that without defensiveness and incorporate that and allow them to be part of the process, I think has been critical to my business success.
Great.
I want to put that out there. And in terms of one more thing, on balance, I think that balance should be redefined into a variety of excesses. Maybe that's what balance
I love that.
Oh, that is
a variety of
great.
excesses.
Right. And so it's just not having
Thank you.
one thing to excess in your life. It's having 3, 4, or 5, or whatever you can handle. That's kind of how I made it work. Because otherwise I was busy making negative statements about myself. Like, what's the matter with you? You're not like the rest of them. Yes.
Thank you for that.
Back there?
Yes, hi. I was wondering if any of you had ever felt like you wanted to give up. And how did you get
Every
through
day.
that?
Every day.
Every day.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely, every day, but you know, I started this based on all what the experiences of these very poor women in different parts of the world who were starting their businesses and running them. And I sort of feel this obligation to never give up for that. I mean, I couldn't possibly give up with my privilege to be able to say I give up is just not okay. Right? I mean, here are these women who are literally living from hand to mouth, not sure whether they can survive or their kids can survive to the next day. And if they're fighting for themselves and they're finding ways to make it all work, then it's an obligation that we all have to find ways to make it all work.
One of the most motivating things for me is when I realize that if I can just keep doing what I'm doing, I don't even need to do like that much more. Just keep doing what I'm doing. Eventually, competitors will tire out, and we will make it to a place where I want to go. Like honestly, it's just like persistence and stamina at some point.
Last question.
First of all, I just wanted to thank you so much for a really wonderful panel and for being so generous with your experience and sharing it with us, and some really terrific advice, I think. I just wanted to add one thing to the question about what parents can do. My husband does have an MBA, and I have a daughter and I have a son, and I'm constantly having to help him realize that he needs to give the same information about his financial advice to my daughter as my son. He's a great dad, and I think he's not here.
Busted.
But I do find that I constantly see an imbalance, and it's not intentional, but it's kind of built in. And so if anybody has that kind of advice, just make sure that you're sharing it equally.
I just want to echo that, and I want to say one thing which I've learned over the years, and it comes back to the whole issue of, especially if you get into like the whole working mom debate, which is endless and exhausting. You know, one way to shut that down is to say, like, I need to earn money for my kids. And I think that women have to be much more open about the fact that money is a reality for us and we're breadwinners. And that shuts down a lot of these issues. It's really hard, but I think that it just makes it clear. Like, I need to earn money just like you do.
My brother works for me, actually. He's our CFO. So we take meetings together sometimes. And it really dawns on me in those moments because we have so many times where we're meeting with a man who's talking to my brother the whole time, asking him what the product is like. And I'm like, I created it. He just runs the finances behind it. He came in later. But my brother's very generous with that, and he'll always say, defer to me and say, that's actually a question for her, and sort of call out the sexism as it's happening. And it really dawns on me how much my parents treated us as equals and made me feel like I had an equal seat at the table as he did, so I'm very grateful to them for that.
I just want to close with one comment for you young startups out there. And some of you women, I think, will relate. The 50s just rock. So for you guys to look forward to this, you know, once you hit the late 40s and on, man, it's like it, and I don't know what the reasons are, but a lot of, as I talk to my classmates here, you just come into it, and it is just a blast. So don't think it's over and you have to do it when you're young, you do, but guys, it only gets better.
That's awesome.
Thank you.